Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this community forum. We think it's an interesting topic. We hope you will find it interesting as well. Uh, I'm Dave Myers. I'm the director of the Berks Alliance, which is a collaboration of the anchor institutions here in Berks County. We host these community forums once a month on what topics that we think are important and significant for the broader community. So we thank you for joining with us. I would normally turn it over to John Weidenhammer, but it doesn't look like John has joined us yet, so we'll keep going. I'm going to cover some very basic ground rules that we have for these sessions. We ask you to keep your cameras on because it's always good to see we're dealing with live people, but to mute your microphones so that we can not have a lot of background noise.
So admin, administrative assistants, clerical, custodial, finance, academic affairs, library. What else would that include?
Yeah. Rhonda, we're going to ask you to mute. Thank you.
He was using administrators, administrative assistants, clerical, custodial, business managers, office staff.
Okay, the ground rules we have for this are, as I said, fairly basic. We ask you to mute your microphone. As you can tell, we can get background noise if that doesn't happen. And we ask you to use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to submit your questions and comments. Once we get through our presentations, we will you go through those questions. I'll either call on you or I'll raise the questions that have been raised by you in the chat function. We record the program. We post it on the Berks Alliance website. We share a copy of the recording with everyone who has registered for the event. And we share it with our friends at BCTV. And now that he's here, I'm going to call on John Weidenhammer, who is the chair of the Berks Alliance, for a brief welcome. John?
Well, thanks, Dave. I apologize for being late to the meeting. I'm stuck in a software update with the Zoom, and I probably should have signed on earlier, but my PC is stuck on trying to get the latest version of Zoom. But in any event, Dave, I want to thank you and the presenters for really hosting for us a really, really important conversation on early childhood learning. You know, a lot of studies show that the impact of early childhood learning on development of children and the really lifetime return on investments in early childhood learning is really significant. So we really look forward to learning more about that. And for those of you who may not know, the Berks Alliance is really a community development organization, and we're focused on improving the health, wealth, and education attainment of our community, and really early childhood learning fits really directly into that. So Dave, I'll send it back to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John. And with that, we're going to get started with our program. We have presentations by three different organizations, 4 different people. I'm going to start off by calling on and introducing Karen Grimm-Thomas, who is with Pennsylvania Key, which is a collaborative effort to support early childhood education in Pennsylvania. And Karen is going to carry the rest of the program because I'm leaning on her heavily here. So Karen, with that, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. And thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank the Berks Alliance for providing us with this opportunity, this chance to talk about this really important issue. And thank you to everybody for joining us today to learn about this. So I am Karen Grimm-Thomas, and I am with the Pennsylvania Key. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself and the role that I've been playing in Pennsylvania's early learning system for the last couple of years. But just to kind of give you a sense of how the hour and a half is going to go, I'm going to do a little stage setting, kind of give you a little background information about the current state of early learning, early childhood education, childcare more specifically in Pennsylvania. I'm going to talk a little bit about some partners of mine, the Early Learning Investment Commission, and unfortunately their staff, Andrea Heberlein and Sarah Laver, they had conflicts today, so they weren't able to join us. but it's not really that big of an issue because we work really closely together. And so I'm able to kind of talk about their portion of the work that we do. You'll even notice when I share my screen that our slides are kind of commingled with one another. So just set the stage and talk about some resources that we have. And then what I'm going to do is turn it over to really what I think is the bulk of the conversation. And that's letting you hear from a couple of exemplars, a couple of communities that have really tried to very intentionally take a look at early childhood, at childcare and access in their communities, and have done some things to support families and support the workforce. After they're done talking, they're going to kick it back to me, and I'll talk a little bit more about the resources and some technical assistance that's available to everybody in the event that you hear something that sparks your interest and makes you think, you know what, I want to try to do something like that in my community. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let me move this out of the way so I can get here. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that all right. Okay, so during today's session, really what we're trying to help you understand is why an adequate supply of childcare is foundational to Pennsylvania's economy. We're going to talk about some different strategies and resources that are available to help businesses and communities looking to ensure that there's adequate access to childcare for the working parents, and then give you some examples of other Pennsylvania communities that have implemented strategies to increase access to childcare. And then we'll talk about some technical assistance that can really help you get started if you're interested. So as Dave said, I am with the Pennsylvania Key. I'm leading an initiative called Creative Childcare Solutions. And so that is operated through the Pennsylvania Key, who is administered by the Berks County Intermediate Unit. The program it's supported by the Office of Child Development and Early Learning of Pennsylvania's Department of Human Services and Pennsylvania's Department of Education. So Creative Childcare Solutions, this initiative, it came about really as the pandemic was, we were coming out of the part of the pandemic where folks were closed down. Childcare programs were still not quite up and operating, and the Office of Child Development and Early Learning was getting a lot of conversation, a lot of interest from businesses about how to potentially open their own childcare programs on site. The office recognized that people were interested in this conversation and really needed quite a bit of supports in doing this. So really what we're trying to do is to help business and community leaders understand that childcare really is a broken market. And because that market is broken, it's having a negative impact on our overall economy. We're trying to build the capacity of business and community leaders to think of childcare supports as an investment in the workforce and the local economy. And we're trying to work with them to ensure that they prioritize solutions that invest in local childcare providers. So rather than going off and doing solutions that are completely, parallel to that system, really looking at what's existing in a community and working to build on that. We're doing that really primarily because our goal is to ensure that there's equitable access to quality care for all families, but particularly for those that are accessing our childcare subsidies. The concern is that if folks are building these parallel systems, it might make it easier for some folks to access care, certain employees or employees of a specific organization, but it could do that at the expense of other folks and make it harder for them to access care. So it's really about ensuring that equitable access. So again, I've been doing this work for not quite 2 years, and one of a really great partner that I have in the work is the Pennsylvania Early Learning Investment Commission. So I really wanted to make sure, again, because Sarah and Andrea couldn't be here, that I really kind of outline who they are and the critical role that they're playing in this conversation. So a little bit about the commission. It is a governor's appointed commission. It's comprised of about 50 senior level business leaders across the Commonwealth. They are really charged with advancing public-private investments in early learning in Pennsylvania. So these commissioners really understand the critical importance of early learning. in terms of the current workforce and our future workforce in Pennsylvania and the impact that it has on the economy. They're often seen as kind of an unexpected voice in this conversation or surprising champions of this conversation. It's not necessarily, you don't expect to hear CEOs of large companies talking about why early childhood is important. So when they do have those conversations, I think people really tend to listen to them in a different way. So, throughout this work, they've really been really kind of a key partner in kind of moving this work forward in different communities. So I'm going to try to lay out in just really quickly. This is a complicated issue. There's a lot of moving parts to it. So what I really want to try to do is kind of lay out in the basic problem that we're experiencing. So based on some work that was done by the St. Louis Federal Reserve last fall, we know that currently there's about 14% fewer childcare teachers or educators working today versus in March of 2020 when the pandemic initially hit. So the lack of staff means that childcare providers aren't operating at maximum capacity. And so that's then happening is that in most areas of Pennsylvania, working families are really struggling to find available spots for their children. So we have places in Pennsylvania that were really considered deserts even before the pandemic. But what's happened is we have this kind of artificial desert throughout the state. And this isn't just a Pennsylvania issue. This is something that we see nationwide. So you might have childcare programs in your area, but chances are they're not operating at full capacity. They might, because they don't have enough teachers to meet those ratios. And so if you don't have teachers, you can't, take in as many children. So we're seeing infant toddler classrooms closing. We're seeing providers combining age groups and combining classrooms. We're seeing providers asking families to do some pretty kind of creative things where they're sharing slots, they're taking turns coming in and maybe not coming in on some days. Just a lot of disruption to the care system and to what families are able to access. We know that this is going on for it's a number of reasons. It's complicated. I think the primary reason that we're seeing is that there is just a lack of pay for these folks. So for our credentialed staff, that means that they are able to access higher paying jobs in sectors such as the public school system. And this isn't really a new thing for the childcare community. We've long understood, and it's long been an issue where as folks get their credentials, they do move into the public school system. And it's really not anything we can fault them for because they're able to make a better income and they're able to get benefits and things like that. We typically or historically had kind of a robust pipeline of folks coming into the system where we were able to, while they worked with us for a few years, they were able to get credentials, get experience. And so we always knew that we had them in the system for that time period. But as the pandemic hit and other sectors changed and increased their salaries, it's becoming increasingly harder to hire folks and get them into the system because they are able to go to other positions that don't require as much. It's a taxing job. It's a high stress job. It's a job that you really don't get much of a break during. You're always on. Keeping kids safe takes a lot of effort. So we know that pay, that stress, that is all kind of contributing to this. So going back to the role of the commission in all of this, they at one point worked with Ready Nation, which is a national organization. And we are really fortunate that we have a Pennsylvania chapter of Ready Nation. But it's a national organization that, again, looks at this kind of grass tops business leaders to really kind of advance early learning in our country. They did a national report, and then they were able to drill down and provide some information that was Pennsylvania specific. And it really pointed to the fact that we're losing quite a bit of money every year because of a lack of adequate childcare supply. They estimated that it was at $6.65 billion. And this report came out in March of 2023. So we know that how that's kind of playing out is in three different buckets. So we have working parents who their earnings are really reduced. They maybe are not as productive as they can be at work because they're concerned about their childcare, whether they have it or whether they, how secure it is. We know that a lot of families, the report detailed that families, workers were turning down promotions, they were turning down opportunities to take on professional development and increase their credentials. So really missed earnings opportunities, and because their childcare, because they didn't have adequate childcare. They're needing to search for jobs potentially, to find new jobs that match their childcare schedule. Just, that's just a huge impact on their ability to earn an income. This second bucket is then businesses themselves. There's lower revenue because there's lower output from those working parents that are struggling with their childcare issues. There are increased costs due to absenteeism, needing to pay people overtime to cover shifts. There's disruptions in their work schedules and needing to move people around, people needing to leave the field and having to rehire or hire new people and retrain people, all of those costs that come with attrition. So businesses were really just seeing that loss in income. And then, so the third bucket then is our taxpayers. And it's really the combination of both those other buckets. Because parents aren't earning as much and businesses' revenue is down, we're really not seeing that tax bus or as robust of a tax base as we could be seeing. And so again, this is just a snapshot of how this is impacting our economy here in Pennsylvania and really across the country. So I jump back then to some early learning investments, some ELIC slides, and to really I talked about what the problem is. And so here's really the kind of the need here is that families obviously need childcare to be able to work. Employers need childcare to ensure that their workforce needs are met. Children, who are our future workforce, they need high quality care. This is a time where we know there's rapid brain development. And it really sets the stage for future learning. And so children need that exposure, that experience with high quality care. If we're going to see those returns on investment, if we're going to see kids ready to succeed in school when they hit the K-12 system. And then finally, our childcare teachers. Staff need that fair, equitable compensation and benefits to ensure that their childcare businesses are sustainable. So all of these things are working together to create this need. So again, we start to go back to, investments in Caring PA and the commission, and really understanding that although the commissioners themselves had a really good handle on why early learning and quality early learning was important, and why we need to think about public-private partnerships and investments in this work, the majority of them, they even personally didn't know what could we do about it? Where could I start? So the commission again did some surveying and did some research around businesses in Pennsylvania, and they found that a lot of really interesting things about how businesses were approaching this. So 81% of businesses, the employers said that they recognize that this was a problem. They have moderate or significant recruitment and retention issues due to childcare. They recognize employers were saying that it's really important that we help our employees meet their childcare needs because we recognize that it's having this impact on our business. They recognize that there's a lack of affordability, and that employees are really struggling with paying for care and finding care. And then 34% of employers said that they currently provide 4 or more types of childcare supports for their employees. So businesses are starting to figure this out. But they still, the overall indication was that we want to do something, but we're not entirely sure what we should be doing. So the commission worked and developed a really, really fabulous toolkit. It's one that I use all the time when I work with either businesses or counties and local municipalities. It's called Investments in Caring PA. And we can make sure that you get information about how to access this toolkit. But it really has a lot of really great information for businesses and even local communities, municipalities, and some strategies that they could use. So when you go into the toolkit, you'll see it's really about providing businesses with this kind of one-stop shop around accessing resources around early learning. And the goal, it's really was to ensure that employers have the tools that they would need to start to think about how to expand the supports that they provide to their workforce around childcare. And I know I'm flying through these slides kind of quickly. Again, we can make sure that you get access to the toolkit and can go in and take a look at it. But I want to make sure that I get to, give our exemplars some really good time to talk with you. And then again, at the end, I can talk about some other resources and technical assistance and how you would access this toolkit. So the kit has, there are resources there for employers themselves, lots of data to kind of help you understand what the issue is, or to help others, maybe it's a board or other folks, partners in your organization, really understand why this is an issue. There are some templates in there about how you could survey workforce or how you could survey residents within a community. There's really great information about, that you could share with employers, with families, that would really help them access care. And then links to other organizations across the state that can provide supports. It's organized in 4 different buckets. So again, there's the need and the impact in Pennsylvania. So if you find that you still need to tell a story and make a case for trying to look at these investments in early learning, this is where you could go to really get a lot of national and Pennsylvania specific data about the impacts that insufficient childcare is having in the state. There's the business toolkit, which really helps you take a look at policies and different strategies that you could implement. There's the Working Families Toolkit, which is really about resources for families. And then there's a series of case studies and exemplars. So you could go in and really kind of see how somebody else, other organizations have, the work that they've been doing to implement this in their specific area. So what I want to do now is I'm going to turn this over. We've got two groups that we really wanted to highlight for you. The first is we're going to be talking with folks from the York Economic Alliance. So the president of the York Economic Alliance is actually a member of the Early Learning Investment Commission. But with us today is Dr. Silas Chamberlain. He's the Chief Strategy Officer and Vice President for Economic and Community Development. And then we also have Sally Pinos, who is the Executive Director of the Bloom Empowerment Center for the York County Economic Alliance. And then when they're done speaking, we're going to hear from Brad Hall. He's the retired president of UGI Energy Services. He's also a member of the commission and, a Reading, a Berks County resident. And he's going to talk to you about their early child care educator training and incentive program. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And that way we can have Silas and Sully take over.
All right. Well, thank you for having us. Thanks for giving us Thanks for giving us an opportunity to share a little bit about what we're up to in York County in this space. And that was a great setup for the context that we're working in. I'm here with Sully. Sully and I are part of a team that is embedded in an organization that's a Chamber of Commerce and an Economic Development Corporation under one umbrella. So when we talk about issues like childcare and other quality of life and economic issues like housing and broadband access, we always just like to point out that at the end of the day, we're a Chamber of Commerce and an Economic Development Corporation that's tasked with ensuring York County has a vibrant economy, that our businesses have the workforce that they need, and that all that adds up to a high quality of life for everyone. And so for us, we're going to talk through how we framed our work in childcare, why we sort of got involved in the first place. And a lot of it will be similar to some of the slides you just saw, except York County specific. And then Sully, and this is the real cool part of the presentation, is Sully talking about what we're actually doing about it here locally. So I just get to talk about the problem, and then Sully gets to talk about the solutions. So I'm going to jump in and just very briefly describe the York County Economic Action Plan. This is our 10-year economic development plan for York County that we completed at the end of 2020, sort of in the midst of the pandemic, really trying to think through what the future of York County's economy should look like in the future, how we could align different organizations around some of our more significant needs, how we could change our systems and be willing to pivot the way that we've done economic and community development for the last decades. And really, how could we get some tangible economic progress, not just sort of talk about the issues, but really intervene where it made sense. And so we had, 1,000+ partners work to put together this economic action plan with a variety of themes and foundational principles, many of which probably resonate for you. But the reason I show this is because we see our work in childcare as being very thoroughly embedded in our work within the economic action plan. And right along with things like the future of our industrial development, what kind of jobs we're going to see in the future, how we do workforce development and align our labor force with industry needs, how we support entrepreneurs and their growth, how we ensure equitable access to capital and economic opportunity, and how do we make sure that York County is a great place for people to live and work through quality of place and infrastructure, and spread those benefits not just to our larger cities or communities, but across all of York County. So our EAP is a plan that's very holistic in nature, but within it, there's very specific tactics. There's about 146 goals in our very dense EAP. And just to show you, we're really intent on not having that EAP sit on the shelf. We're now in our 3rd year of implementing the plan, and about 80% of the overall actions are either completed or underway. So it's very much a guiding North Star type of document for us. And it's resulted in work across a variety of different categories, from a Trail Towns program to countywide broadband investments to infrastructure investments, and a couple things that Sully will touch on later. And the thing that we're really going to focus in on is an initiative called ECHO. Every Child Has Opportunities. But I just wanted you to see sort of where it lives amongst all the other things that we're working on. And in working through our economic action plan, we've always cared a lot about data and following the data. But in our new plan, we really let the data guide where our emphasis went. And we hired Fourth Economy, an economic consulting firm, because of their strengths in data analysis. But that also required us to be willing to look at data that told us we weren't doing as well as we could be and pointed out our weaknesses. And so some of the initiatives that we won't be talking about today really came to the top through data. And we've continued that ever since, with annual COVID recovery reports each year, with deep dives into some major topics like housing availability. We just completed a conditions and needs assessment around housing costs, bi-monthly snapshot reports that we do in partnership with Lancaster Economic Development Company, and investments from our own funding in things like Placer AI to do a better job of analyzing foot traffic to businesses and to public spaces, and Data Axle to be able to understand the number of businesses in our community, their size, their composition. And so coming out of that, we have issued a lot of reports, but then what we think is important is you have the data and then you actually decide a path forward to helping to address what the data is revealing. We also, during the pandemic, early days of the pandemic, had a countywide recovery task force convened by our county commissioners. And I just wanted to show you that even as early as, I think this was April or May of 2020, we were already getting responses back from our childcare community, which was part of our recovery task force, to say, we need to really pay close attention to what's happening with childcare, its availability, what it's going to continue to do for people entering the workforce or leaving the workforce, and the implications for overall quality of life. So within our recovery task force, there were a bunch of short-term things that we thought we could do to mitigate the worst of the immediate impacts, but then also some longer-term goals that really created the framework for the work Sully is going to talk about. And we also started sounding the alarm very early on the impact of the pandemic on childcare. So for 3 years in a row, we issued COVID impact reports that showed that the childcare shortage that we already had before the pandemic was, significantly exacerbated during the pandemic, and that we still are with that today. So in 2020, obviously, the message was incredibly dire. At that point, 46% of all child care providers were closed. So we were in a true emergency. But even in 2021, we were already seeing providers that were remaining permanently closed despite being allowed to open. We were seeing capacity drop. We were seeing licensed provider capacity continuing to not meet demand, and that continued into 2022. So I just share that to say we've sort of followed the data for many years and kept saying to our business community and our other stakeholders, there's a huge issue here. And now in the last couple of years, we've really started to take action on it. We also know that COVID impact reporting, it's not like those issues have gone away, as you saw in a lot of the data slides just a moment ago. This is a statewide issue, and we know that it affects a lot of different families, really families all across the Commonwealth, and as an extension affects businesses across the Commonwealth. And I won't repeat some of this data, but we think it's pretty impactful when 54% of employers in Pennsylvania said one of their most significant struggles with retaining employees is related to childcare issues. So where are we at now? We have seen a steady decline in York County in childcare capacity. We have seen a 21% decrease in total providers since the pandemic. And we have seen, or we currently have 170 ECE centers in York County as of April of last year. And the one of the significant issues we see is that those centers that have remained open have not maintained the same capacity prior to the pandemic. And so even that number of closings is really an understatement of the capacity that we've lost. And so we've estimated what that gap is. Estimated children under 5 years of age is 25,000. Amongst them, the needing childcare, 16,000. And our gap is around 4,800 children who could use care and need care, but can't find it because of the lack of availability. And obviously those children are part of households that have parents that may be working otherwise if they could find childcare, or may be forced into situations that aren't great for them or their children because they're going to unlicensed care or they're relying on unreliable sources of childcare for their children. We have continued to communicate, the urgency around this issue for the business community. The issues that we're seeing are really around workforce in many ways, largely due to educator attraction and retention, as was pointed out earlier, and educator compensation being a really significant contributing factor. We have seen, of course, reduced capacity, and that's been enduring, and that has created workforce instability. Overall, our workforce is really strong. We've seen our labor supply continue to expand, and we've seen record lows in terms of unemployment. And yet we know that some people have permanently dropped out of the workforce because of childcare issues, and it particularly has affected women in the workforce. And we know that that centers don't have the capacity to expand to reach that full capacity that they were once at. And many families report rolling blackouts and some of those unforeseen issues related to limited staffing, which of course then has a ripple effect to everybody that's a working parent. And so, like I said, we've tried to be solution oriented. And so Suli is going to walk you through, given all this data and the impacts it's had on our business community and our community in general, what we've actually done about it. So I'll turn it over to Suli.
Thanks, Silas. And for those of you watching and you just saw the screen come in, we are just right next to each other, but thanks to technology, we can navigate and look, have our own little frames. So good morning, everyone. As Silas mentioned, my name is Suli Pinos, and working with the York County Economic Alliance, in particular with our Bloom Business Empowerment Center. And all of the data that Karen has shared on a statewide level, and Silas in regards to specific actions here in York County, really showing the time frame over the last few years where we've been leveraging the data to now some of the solutions, and also looking ahead as we have data on impact of centers and the impact on employers. But one of those missing pieces has been the impact to the families that have either been able to access care or that have been impacted the most. So we'll have some information in the forthcoming slides. So just in front of you is the information on one of those immediate reactions from the county's recovery task force, but also throughout the several rounds of federal relief programs, as a way to retain the talent that was currently at our local providers, to again be able to give those providers the opportunity to maintain their capacity, not have to shut their doors, again, rolling blackouts. What were some of those immediate ways to provide direct support that wouldn't affect someone's access to additional programs? So these educator awards were really, in fact, retention awards, were ways to provide direct support to existing providers, to offer to their employees. And the stories that we've heard, excuse me, from its first year to the ability from providers to be able to keep their employees for longer tenure, and the employees themselves that receive some of these additional recruitment incentives, just the ability for them to be able to pay other bills. This was something that was, at the time of stimulus bonuses and retention grants. This was also a way for some of those employees to be able to upskill themselves, gain participation in other programs. So roughly about $500,000 was deployed in the first round of the pilot through the initiative of ECHO that you'll hear about in a few slides. This is one of those programs that is a key focus to continue, but also expand the funding pot. To again, just very simply expand the reach across different parts of the county. We certainly know that here in York County, average commute times in car can be 26 minutes. Public transit can be well over an hour and a half to 2 hours. So how can we be strategic with this information to deploy funding and expand capacity in areas across the county? I have a clicker, so I'm doing that. One of the other ways, as Silas noted, as the York County Economic Alliance, Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development Corporation, and with our Bloom Business Empowerment Center, we have a collaborative workforce committee that we call Pathways that has supported the Pathways to Prosperity Workforce Plan. Again, it's an ability to bring our business, education, and community together around several initiatives or several needs at once, really looking to strengthen the collaborative and alleviate duplication of services and alleviate pathways for the access to information amongst all of our partners. Just this childcare survey was deployed through that Pathways Collaborative from our community-based organizations, sharing the survey at pickup times, to this was a survey that we conducted directly, made it available in Spanish and English. But at the time, this was at the end of last year, fall and end of last year, our team and our workforce partners were out at several community events to be able to gauge that direct family impact. And what does childcare mean for that household? Is it a loved one taking care of the little ones? Is it, do they have access to a traditional provider location? Or what do they define as childcare? Through this, we were also very intentional in reaching to our communities of color across the county. So again, making sure that language was our language was inclusive to reach more households, and throughout that, being able to reach a little over half of our local municipalities here in the county of York, which is very impactful. And again, we can take this information, combine it with the impact reports that Silas noted from the Economic Action Plan, but also our statewide partners such as ELIC, and be able to continue to build the story of the impact of childcare, not just in York County, but in our region. Certainly here, just some of the anecdotes, and there are several pages of responses from the families noting how some have had to take on credit card debt to be able to make their childcare provider payments. So now, not only are we seeing this impacting someone's ability to be employed, but also their ability for their financial and generational wealth. They are accruing debt at larger interest rates. Individuals are having to drop off children at various times. There's, again, several pages of very impactful anecdotes that for us is very helpful to have as we're meeting with our business community and we're meeting with our employers and sharing this with them directly, just to encourage them to look at flexible shift start times or flexible leave for their employees that may note that they have little ones and additional family members to take care of, to look at additional office operations and such. So this information is so helpful for us to have, and really was deployed through our workforce collaborative that reaching out to higher education. Again, it's something that any of you can take back into your communities and offer. And if you would like the questions, again, happy to share that as we'll continue to build on this survey. And then just as we're talking about the initiative and how the evolution of all of this data and work to the new initiative called ECHO, Every Child Has Opportunities. It was a pilot launched here in York County officially at the start of this year. The YCEA is one of the anchor partners for this effort, along with our community, the Community Connections for Children organization, serving as this region's early learning resource center. This was the ability to bring business, education, and workforce and those entrepreneurial buckets that you saw in the slide of the Economic Action Plan, and bringing them directly to support the childcare industry. Again, really focused on expanding collaborations, expanding all of those coalitions that have been established here in York County, and really looking at how our business community and our philanthropic community can support the childcare industry moving forward. Through this pilot initiative, we are super thankful and appreciative to have the support of those partners, where about 15 million has been raised directly from non-taxpayer dollars, all philanthropic, all industry-based, to create new programs to support existing programs such as the Educator Retention Awards, but also to look at our entrepreneurial community and how can ECHO support the growth and the creation of additional home-based providers, or to help legitimize some of those examples of someone's friend, someone's family member might be watching the little ones, or the neighborhood. What are ways that we can provide that direct education for them? So with ECHO, the goal, I don't want to say the goal is simple, because this is not something that is going to be done overnight, let alone, but this is trying to continue the work and expand the capacity of the resources here in York County. As we look to the data of the shortage of childcare positions and provider capacities and wait lists, really the focus within ECHO is that population of the 0 to 6-year-olds and their respective families, but also, as I noted, to help expand the over 120 early childcare providers in York County and give them the resources to be able to attract and retain more talent. As we know, our workforce is continuing to age out. So how can we connect with our younger, our newer populations, individuals coming into York County for the first time, and how can we connect them and provide them with the awareness that the childcare sector can be not only an impactful industry to be a part of, but also help to elevate the case to make childcare a livable and family sustaining industry and occupation. So with ECHO, there are 3 primary focuses. Again, I keep mentioning expanding or strengthening the coalitions and collaboratives across the county. Each of our organizations plays a direct role in these focus areas through committees, where we are sharing information about hiring fairs under the workforce focus within the community. That one is simple in knowing that how are we getting this information out? How are we making it accessible? How are we looking at grassroots strategies and opportunities to help share this information to individuals that want to start a business, to families that may not know where to seek childcare, to companies that may not know that there are existing resources like Community Connections for Children that can be a direct employer and childcare referral for those companies. And at the same time, identify who are those employers and businesses that are interested in some of these more creative solutions, and how can we work with them for some pilots. So this year, after the launch of Bloom, we've been working directly to support ECHO in developing a pilot grant round. Through Bloom, we are a resource center for individuals seeking opportunity as entrepreneurs or learners by capital, and that might mean through a grant or a loan, as we administer several loans and financing programs for the county. And in particular, Bloom was established to support our startup and our businesses owned by individuals of color and women across York County. So this pilot here of our Bloom ECHO grants will hopefully and very ambitiously deploy about 400,000 to about 20 to 30 new businesses that will operate as a home-based provider. So these might be individuals that have reached out to our early learning resource centers to say, I'm really interested in starting my own business. Can I sign up for your what they call here your connections classes, or I've taken some of the courses through DHS to learn about how to start my home-based provider business. What else do I need to do? We know that that roughly startup costs can range anywhere from 10 to 25,000, depending on the municipality, depending on the infrastructure of the home and any types of renovations needed. So this this ECHO Bloom grant will hopefully provide some seed capital to these home-based providers. With that in mind, all of these providers will have the support of our early learning resource centers and Bloom to further their entrepreneurial education. And to support our already established early childcare providers in the nonprofit and for-profit sector, again, to help them with their capacity or help them with direct project expansions, not specifically operating costs. We will also be launching in the next few weeks an innovations grant program. Again, roughly that one will have higher allocations, about 50,000 will be the maximum grant award for some of these providers, and really again to support direct planning, strategic planning, expansion of their services, and much more that we will be sharing publicly in the next few weeks at our Early Education Summit. And then through ECHO in this first year, looking at ways that we can leverage the building infrastructures of our school districts that already may be operating at longer and later times for sports, for other committees or clubs. How can we identify some collaborations to bring in some early childcare into the already established buildings? And on our workforce side, we're directly supporting ECHO again through our hiring fair series. Here we host, this year we will be hosting 5 hiring fairs. We had our first one in April, and we host these at our local baseball stadium, which is accessible by public transit, and it is a well-recognized community access center. And through these hiring fairs, we identify and invite employers that would be willing to hire individuals where English may not be their native language, where employers that can offer opportunities on a case-by-case basis for individuals re-entering society from incarceration, individuals, veterans, opportunities for our in-school youth. Our first one, we had about 700 attendees, and we have 4 more for this year. So really looking at leveraging the reach of the hiring fairs to expose individuals that are interested in the childcare sector, either as an entrepreneur themselves, or if they want to gain their CDA certificate, or if they are interested in some of the pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship training programs that we are also piloting really being able to maximize one's attention and ability to sign up for other programs. So we'll be sharing all of the information of ECHO and our Early Learning Resource Center at the hiring fairs, but also helping all of our existing providers share any of their job openings. We'll be the ones to share that, almost like a indirect like staffing agency, because we know that to ask someone to leave their business and their provider facility might also mean that they would have to close to attend a hiring fair for 4 hours of their time. So we're already there. It's one way that we can provide that and share that information at no cost for the providers, and hopefully be able to connect them with additional workers and that talent. So, and again, we have our workforce committee, our pathways committee that has been active in ECHO and trying to support some of these strategies. So then lastly, just to be able to share this and broadcast it across the community, we're leveraging we're creating some events such as an early childcare forum that we'll have just next month. It's following our Economics Club Breakfast, which is one of our series programs at the YCEA. And again, being able to bring in several stakeholders, from providers to our direct training partners to our business community, and bringing them all together to share this data, share more about ECHO. And that will be the launch of both of the grant programs that I shared with you, from ECHO to Innovation. We're also helping with the launch of the ECHO website. And also next month, we'll have another program focused on highlighting a business that is working on starting their early childcare facility with our early learning resource centers, to showcase that to at our women's business center lunch. So really trying to take multi-pronged approach, but these are all resources and supports that we've offered, that we already offer as the York County Economic Alliance, as the Chamber and Economic Development. And it's just one way to help alleviate capacity, or to support capacity for our early learning resource centers and our childcare industry. And with that, I thought that went a little bit faster than I thought, but with that, we'll take any questions, Karen, or we'll turn it back to you. You tell us what you would like us to do.
Let's move on to Brad.
Okay, I'm going to stop my share. And we'll put our information in the chat as well. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'll quickly reintroduce myself. I'm Brad Hall. I'm a volunteer with United Way, and along with my wife, Barbara Hall, we serve on a Ready, Set, Read board, which is a organization that was created by the United Way. And I see a few of our Ready, Set, Read directors are on the call here. So I just want to give that as a way of a background. Unlike our previous speakers, who I think did an excellent job of setting the stage and describing the challenges in the early child care education sector, I'd like to share with you a specific program and just use my time to give you an update on a program that the United Way, in partnership with the Reading Area Community College, implemented about 6.5 years ago. And I'd like to give you that update and just give you a little more context. We did not have the resources that York County did to provide a countywide program. And we were looking at, in specific, the city of Reading, which was a childcare desert by any definition you might want to come up with, and certainly in the areas of quality childcare. Most of their childcare centers were Keystone 1 and a few 2-star centers. And we defined our quality childcare as 3- and 4-star centers. And again, our program, when you have limited resources and you have to ration them, we wanted to focus on the areas with the greatest need and also where we could affect quality. So the name of our program is called the Early Childcare Educator Training and Incentive Program. It just rolls right off the tongue. So I better convert this over to slideshow. Okay. And we thought it'd be easier to call it the CDA program, which stands for the credential that we are hoping to get our providers and get them, not only get them their credentials and upgrade their education level in this field, but also to get them to institute a curriculum in the learning centers where they work, and most importantly, to keep them. So this is a train and retain program, and it was done with kind of a business focus on this, because we had earlier programs where we had tried to upgrade the learning centers, only to come back 6 months later and all the people that we had trained were gone. And so we needed to find a way to keep them. And so we put financial incentives in place there to keep workers there once we invested in their upgrading their training. So the program was meant to create an ability for them to earn their credential while still continuing working. And there was no realistic way that we were going to get them to stop working. This was something that we had to work around their primary job as a childcare provider. And in many cases, since we were focusing on the inner city, a highly Latino community, many of the childcare centers and providers are Latinos, and we needed to have language training is also part of the curriculum. The second goal of the program was to make sure that we introduced a literacy curriculum in the classrooms. So we also had the follow-up piece to make sure that that was being incorporated and that they were incentivized to stay with their center. And of course, I would call it the overarching goal here was to help the centers raise their Keystone Star rating. That was our objective measure, to see if we could get them to get to the 3 and 4 star level. At the start of this program, there was only one 4-star center in the city of Reading. So again, the specifics of the program, it's launched and administered by the United Way of Berks County, provide the oversight. They recruited the child care providers. And for reasons I'll share with you in my next slide, this is a challenging group of students, and they had their own unique challenges and needs. And so we had to work with them on a number of other areas, which included language support. They needed laptops, which in many cases meant they needed training with the laptops. And we actually had, for the very first cohorts, we actually had an embedded coach, a bilingual coach in the classroom with each cohort. Let me back up. We ran the program in a cohort fashion. So there, you can see we had 10 to 12 students per cohort, and each one of those cohorts would then have a coach embedded in the classroom with them to help them through that. Since then, the Reading Area Community College has actually provided a lot of that language support in the classroom. The program provides stipends during the during the coursework, and then following for an additional 3 years based upon staying with their centers. Now, the stipends were front-loaded, so I would say the stipends were probably in the order of magnitude of about $4,500. And the bulk of that was front-ended. It was front-ended while they were doing the class coursework and while they were securing their CDA credential from the state following that coursework. And then the remaining $2,000 or so were spread out over the following 3 years. And in a declining fashion, with the understanding that the childcare center would start filling up some of that gap with better pay. Our entire financial support probably added about $1 per hour to the wage that they were receiving. The total cost of the program, counting the laptop, coaching, support services, stipends, and classwork, was about $12,000 per provider. So you can see there's probably anywhere between $100,000 and $120,000 per cohort. Okay, so some of the unique challenges which I touched on, but I just wanted to go through here is that, of course, we were dealing with high-risk, non-traditional students. Many of these we were dealing with at most a high school education. In many cases, language was a big challenge. We had some of these teachers are parents, and they have some basic needs. We actually had one case, I know at least one case where we had one of our early child care providers in the program became homeless. And this was what was great about having United Way supporting and administering this program, is because we were able to find immediate help for some of these basic needs and challenges that came up while they're in their coursework. And then, of course, there's the laptops, which is how almost anybody that's a student in college today will need a laptop, which means you also need training. And here we're 6.5 years into the program. We just started our 10th cohort, which gives us about 102 students who either have participated in the program or are currently active or in the program right now. Of those, I just put down some statistics here. 73% have completed their education requirements, but keep in mind, 22% are still in the classes right now. Of those who have completed their education requirements, actually, no, of the 102 students, 66% have received their CDA credential. And actually 25% are pursuing their education beyond this. So they're working towards their bachelor's and associate's degree. And in fact, we have 16% of the students who've been in this program have done that. The retention rate, which is all important here, is that after 6.5 years, our retention rate is 72%. And I have 76% shown on the slide because this is we wanted to inflate that number, right? So we said, look, if they left the program, but they're still in the early childcare education field in our county, we'll count that as a success. So we have a 76% retention rate. And then I'd say that 24 childcare centers have used or benefited from the program, and 10 of these centers have increased by at least 1 star level since that. So when I mentioned at the beginning of this program, we had 1 4-star center in the city. Today we have 7 centers that have achieved a star rating of 4, 904 children. If you count that on a 1-shift basis, are receiving quality childcare. And of the 24 childcare centers, there's a capacity of 2,500 students that are affected by that. That's our way of looking at this. Now, when I talk about retention rate, I also want to point out an important feature in that if we can keep these providers in the early childcare field, this becomes a pipeline. Many of these people have gone on to pre-K counts or other programs or even public school. So we consider that a success as well because pipeline is an important part of this program. And then I would just offer up some conclusions, which I guess wouldn't be big surprises. That is the staff retention of trained workers is essential to improving the quality of these childcare centers. And if I look forward, we are hoping to get another 3 star rating level increases before the summer. And I'd like to offer this up as a prototype for a public-private partnership for funding. Just so that you're aware, this has been largely funded using private money. I would say that over 80% of the funding for this program of the past 10 cohorts has come from private donors and dollars. We've been challenged in trying to get more public money for this. But the program, hopefully with the success that we're seeing from the program, we should be able to attract money from both the private and public sector going forward. With that, I'll conclude my update on the program and turn it back to Karen for questions or not.
Well, I'm going to jump in a little bit here if I can, Brad. Thank you very much. Really fascinating presentations. I mean, this is really, really great stuff, and it's a real sign of the potential that could be here with broader community engagement. Before we go back to the questions and comments, I'm going to call on the United Way has been an important player, Brad, as you mentioned, here in Berks County in this. They're also very aggressively leading a work group here in the city of Reading, coming out of the study done by the Harwood Institute, working with the Hispanic Center and some other partners on addressing some more issues in terms of early childhood. And I'm going to call on Ashley Chambers to do a quick update about what that project's doing.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, John, for having us this afternoon. So as Karen alluded to a little bit ago, child development is most critical when a child is first born. And actually 90% of a child's brain actually develops before the first 5 years, before they even enter kindergarten. And so what we're finding in our work is that many families and caregivers do not realize how critical the first 5 years of development are for a child. And so as Dave mentioned, we do lead the early childhood education team for the Harwood Initiative. Many of our team members are on the call today. And our focus over the last 18 months really has been building awareness for parents, caregivers about the importance of a child's first 5 years of development, while also engaging them in connecting with different experiences, activities for their little ones to assist with that brain development. And this helps sets the children up for success when they're entering school. We've tried to tackle the community kind of one neighborhood at a time. And so right now we're focusing on the northeast area of Reading. And a few of the outreach efforts that we've done, we've spent some time connecting with families in the 11th and Pike playground. We were able to support movie nights last year in the playground, and they're soon to be coming back this summer. We're partnering with the Northeast branch of the Reading Public Library to serve as a hub for families with young children, and have done some outreach to the different businesses in that neighborhood, helping to share information about the library and early childhood education. And then also connecting with the BCIU and Head Start Center that's in that neighborhood as well. And some of our team, like Barb Starkey from Early Learning Resource Center, has continuously shared with us how they're changing the way they do business, changing the way they ask questions of parents and caregivers. And this really is a step towards systemic change. They're moving from an emphasis on, the child care subsidy to really what are the aspirations for your child, and why is it important for them to be in high quality care. And with the ELRC having a reach over a couple of regions, we could see this change in childcare and kind of the awareness really spanning beyond Berks County. We've also engaged in a social media campaign, both in English and Spanish. We've received much attention. We went viral with one of our videos on YouTube with, I think over, close to 100,000 views, which was really exciting. We continue to create content and post videos, and actually are working with finding other kind of content creators in the community that are willing to share these awareness posts to help spread the information further. So, if any of you are interested, I know many of you are already engaged, but if anyone else is interested in being a part of the work or sharing some of the awareness campaign, I'll put my email in the chat and happy to talk further with you.
Thank you, Ashley. So now we'll move on to the questions and comments. And I'm going to start with one. Brad, you said that 76% retention rate. I think most of the colleges in Pennsylvania would be very satisfied with a 76% retention rate for their students. What do you think has made that so successful?
Well, I would say that what has made it successful, we like to use the term secret sauce when we talk about it, because our program has yielded we've had a much better yield than probably on average. And that has been because of the support that they get while they're going to school. So again, the coaching support throughout that is a bit labor intensive. So we put that in place. And then also I'd say the retention bonuses were structured. We thought the retention bonuses at first were a little light. We didn't know if that would have an impact or not, but it apparently did. And so we were able to get people interested in going back to school and getting them the confidence that they could go back to school. For many of these providers, school wasn't a very good experience first time around. And so getting them back to school and getting their confidence up, and I certainly hand that over to RAC for giving a lot of support there as well. And the United Way with its coaching along the way just created a great environment. And of course, there are the issues that come up in life that mean you can't finish, and we've had a couple of those, but we've had some really good results with the yield on that.
Yeah, it's neat to see that a small investment could make that kind of impact.
It's also sad to see that because
Yeah.
it didn't take
Because-
much to motivate people, which is again kind of an indictment on the pay here.
Yeah. I'm going to ask the crowd from York, how hard was it to engage the business community in this conversation? Why did the chamber there decide that this was an important issue?
So I think it goes back to our economic action plan and sort of having a county-wide strategy to frame the work. So it didn't feel like we were raising this issue in isolation or just felt like an ad hoc, maybe temporary interest. When it's framed as part of our economic action plan, which is, people focused on workforce development issues, barriers to employment, barriers to economic mobility, it becomes pretty obvious that childcare should be a central part of that, along with things like transportation equity, access to capital. And so honestly, I don't think we got a lot of pushback from it. And in fact, some of our business leaders were the ones that said, what would it look like if we were to give at a very high level compared to maybe, giving $100,000 grant to, or maybe even just 400,000 to continue what we were already doing. And instead say, what if we, collectively across multiple foundations gave at a level that would actually, move the needle on some of this work. Our partners are very quick to say, even at $3 million a year, that's not enough. And that's true because the scale of the issue is so much larger than that. But it is one of the few issues where I think, we wish that we could get our community to approach other issues like this, where it's sort of a joint recognition of a shared issue and then a joint funding strategy to actually try to address it. But that was all contingent on identifying the issue, putting it as part of a larger strategy, and then showing, if you invest in these specific tactics, you can actually see real change. We've used a very similar approach on Bloom that Celia leads, which is all around, as she said, business creation and empowering entrepreneurs. But that goes back to data that showed we lagged the state and national average, an intervention that was fundable, and then data to prove that it's being impactful. And it's the same thing with childcare.
Yeah, that sense of collaboration and investment is really significant, and get that many partners to be engaged in this. You mentioned, I think, that there were 4 or 5 different ways that businesses were trying to engage in this issue. Do you want to talk about those a little bit more?
Sure, I can take that. One I mentioned through our Pathways Workforce Collaborative. So that has been a vehicle and a collaboration to bring many of those what we may call barriers to employment or economic trends that we should really focus on that are impacting one's ability to work or one's ability to retain work or start their business. So our Workforce Collaborative, we convene that directly. We meet on a bi-monthly basis now. There's over 40 partners in that collaborative. Many of our larger manufacturing stakeholders or our direct industry trade-based associations. So our Manufacturer Association representing many manufacturers in the area, but also the region. our local residential construction partners, our electrical apprenticeship programs, and bringing our higher ed and all of those systems under one collaborative roof. Another way has been through our surveys. As a chamber and economic development corporation, we also have over 1,100 members at any given moment, and we're hosting various events. So those are additional ways that we can really share and expand the awareness of the needs of childcare or the impact of childcare through our membership or through some of our events, such as our economics club or our women's business center that has over 120 members meeting on a monthly basis. So we've really looked at ways that we can weave childcare as an economic advocacy issue, but weaving that through all of the services that we already have through YCEA. And again, really to strengthen those collaborations to alleviate some of the businesses having to meet with several stakeholders or organizations. We also serve as callers on behalf of the state through a program called Engage, that we go out to meet with businesses from any sector and ask a few questions, really a proactive way to survey them or engage with them and see what their needs are. How can we help? Who can we help connect them with? Or again, where can we find some champions of some of those creative solutions? And then lastly, I'll note one of our other initiatives is called Welcoming Workplaces. And as Silas mentioned, all of the focus within equity and DEI in the Economic Action Plan, Welcoming Workplaces is just what it sounds. It's an effort for us to help elevate the work that companies are doing to invest in their workforce, but also invest in the communities where they're located. And really looking at the spectrum, the broad spectrum of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging and accessibility, and how are they making those efforts? So childcare is another way that we can bring that into the space of diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging, and look to we have 75 participants right now in our Welcoming Workplaces program. It's a 2-year term. There's no cost for them to participate. We're really trying to share their information to others in that same industry because they speak the same industry language, and we are not the experts. So rather, we'd like to connect them to others in their space that are already leading that work.
And I'm going to, one more question, and it's sort of the punishment of giving me statistics about things. But you said in your survey, about 81% of the employers said this was an issue, but only about 34% were investing in early childhood. What are the challenges with that? Why do you think that's an issue?
I think there's a number of reasons, and it kind of depends on the industry. And we spoke about low wages in the childcare industry, and it's similar margins in a lot of our companies that are trying to, find ways to invest in their workforce. And some ways those are non-monetary things like flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you saw that percentage of families sort of not leaving the workforce, but I think it was something like 20% of those surveyed had switched to remote work or a hybrid schedule. So I think there's ways, and I think that might point to the need for some education too through our employees or employers, that they may be doing things that are actually supporting, the ability of families to do childcare in a better way, and may not even realize it, or there could be easy things they could do, and they aren't currently doing them. But it kind of leads to a comment I was thinking as Sully was speaking about just the pragmatism of our employers. I think if we were trying to, raise this as an issue 5 years ago, it would have been more of a struggle, frankly. But in this current economic climate, particularly where workforce is just the number one issue you will hear every employer speak about, they are looking for what are those barriers to getting people employed and retaining them. Childcare is just number one. But there's others. So it's a way to get them interested in transportation equity and thinking about things like public transit and housing. And so I think whereas we haven't seen many employers actually get, engaged in things like transportation and housing and childcare, that really is the next step. And it's not going to all be because of altruism. It's going to be pure pragmatism. That's how they ensure that they're attracting and retaining a workforce. And you know what, if that's the means to the end, then that's okay too.
You raised another question I have that fits into that. You mentioned that a large number of the workers who were affected by the lack of access to childcare were female workers. Is there other demographic information you have about the economic level or education level of the worker, or any other demographic factors that you see playing out?
Well, just from our most recent survey last fall about the household, just on roughly the 300 responses, we were able to garner about 30% of the respondees and those households identified as individuals of color. Well over 80% of the respondents were females. And again, some may not have had to leave their places of employment, but some shared that they had to turn down a promotion. So again, turning down the ability to earn more to be able to keep their children within the childcare system. And certainly that plays into other areas such as what we've heard as the benefits cliff. So if someone earns more and they're losing additional subsidies, then maybe they're not able to keep their child or little one in a program, or will have to pay more. So that may play a role into someone's ability of turning down a promotion or turning down taking on more responsibility.
And I think it's like housing or anything else. It's really our ALICE population that bears the greatest burden, and the more of portion of their household income that's going to childcare, transportation, or housing, the more difficult it becomes to, remain outside the poverty line or attain a living wage.
Karen, what do you think the long-term impacts are of the lack of access to childcare? What are the consequences for society, for the workforce, for our communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, we touched upon the idea that it impacts a worker's long-term earnings. When women have to, and it's typically women that are doing it, when they're altering their work schedule, when they're taking breaks out of the workforce, or maybe they're reducing hours, it has long-term impacts on their Social Security. It has long-term impacts on their ability to save for retirement. I think the other part of this, and it dovetails with the idea of, quality childcare is early education, is that we're going to see some long-term impacts in terms of our ability to continue to attract new people into the state, or keep people in the state because they don't feel like they can, have a living wage and work. And then what it does to kids in terms of, we've really come to expect that really basic return on investment when we have high quality programs. I think that ELIC has done an amazing job over the last 15 years or so, and our advocacy community really turning this into a bipartisan issue and helping everybody. Everybody agrees that, kids who have high quality early learning do better in school, and they do better then later on in life. And I think even just subtle changes in what's happening, just, that is all based in relationships. And when kids don't have that consistent access to the same provider, we're not going to see the same return on investments that we've come to expect. And I think we're really going to start to see that the gains that we made in terms of kids entering school ready to learn are not going to continue to hold up. So it's on a bunch of different levels. I think we're going to see it.
What role do public sector employers play in this? I mean, York County, it's clearly the county has decided to work with the chamber there to make this an important issue. Are public employers engaged in this process as well? They involved?
Yeah, I've actually, so the initiative that I'm working with, the Creative Childcare Solutions Initiative, and the technical assistance we're provided, it really started around businesses, but it's actually evolved. And I spend more time now working with local municipalities and counties. So, cities that are starting to think about, thinking whether it's taking a look at what Philadelphia did with their sugary beverage tax that created that pre-K, their Philly pre-K for children in the city. They're starting to think about, again, this idea that it impacts the quality of life, it impacts their ability to keep these residents that they have and attract new residents and continue to grow economically.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't give Barb Starkey a chance to ask a question or make a comment. Barb, do you want to say anything?
Well, you got me on the spot there, Dave. Just that it's so amazing to hear what's going on in York and to see the work that United Way's been doing. So I'm very hopeful that we can continue to move this work forward and make changes for the families and children in our communities.
Well, Karen, Silas and Sully and Brad, thank you very much. I think this is a fascinating topic and could be so transformative if we really get more and more people engaged and supportive in it. We will share the video from this program with everybody who's registered. I think I'm going to try to send it maybe even to some other people beyond that. It's great stuff and so important. It's like people talk about this being a two-generational issue. It's the kids are obviously affected by it. Their parents are affected by it. And I think one of the things our presentations today led us to understand is employers are affected by it, that there's a real need to engage and invest in this very, very important topic. So thank you for that. We will be sharing the video, as I mentioned. We will also share the PowerPoint presentations with everybody who registered for this. And I want to thank you very much for joining us today. It was a terrific program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, presenters.
Thank you.